Hello again. This month we tackle the finest viewpoint of the Southern Highlands, Niel Buya, and its magnificent twin, Stucken Lochen. This expedition involves a traverse of the outstandingly beautiful Glen Lyon and beyond, on which we'll visit the famous Praying Hands and look at the history of Megarney Castle and the first recorded Munroist, Mad Colin Campbell. The location of these mountains is pleasingly remote, and while they're fairly easy in good weather, even after a 20-mile walk in, their summits command views that will make even the most grizzled mountaineer exhale in wonder, and therefore doing it in poor visibility is basically criminal. Beginning in Fortingall, we'll venture along Glen Lyon past the Praying Hands and Bridge of Balgie to the wilderness of High Loch and Daff, the Stag Loch. From here, northwest across rough ground and a confusing array of paths, we gain the indistinct south ridge of Niel Buya, and at the end of a catwalk-like prow above Rannoch Moor, the absolutely awe-inspiring summit. It's also possible to reach Niel Buya from the north via Rannoch Station and Bridge of Gur. This is a shorter walk-in than ours, but if you want to climb Stucken Lochen and return this way, you'll be climbing Niel Buya twice, though as we'll see, this is no great hardship. Southward lies its more mountainous twin, Stucken Lochen, which certainly takes no prisoners in its initial section, but rewards greatly thereafter at its spectacular summit, Corrie and North Ridge, and like its twin, boasts views almost without parallel in the Southern Highlands. Greetings! Here we are back at Fortingall, and just about to turn off towards Glen Lyon. This time we're going to traverse the vast majority of the glen in order to reach the twin peaks of Stucken Lochen and Niel Buya. If you're wondering who was trying to butt into my introduction there, this is the culprit. Oh, it's my wee pals. Oh, my parents. My poor parents. Glen Lyon is home to the endangered red squirrel, and motorists would be well advised to drive slowly and pay attention lest your contribution to the local conservation effort consist mainly of squashing them. Trust me, your actions will not go unnoticed. A good way to check if you have a soul is to look at this picture and weigh up the cost-benefit analysis of turning it into a pizza. Lyon is a corruption from the Gaelic Lee, meaning flood. The old names which the glen bore were descriptive of its condition at different periods. The oldest that is known to us is Glen Fasach, Desert Glen. Later it was called Crom Glen nan Clach, or Crooked Glen of the Stones. This is the name by which it is referred to in the old saying, Finn had 12 castles in the Crooked Glen of the Stones. These castles were round towers dotted along Glen Lyon, supposedly built by the mytho-historical Fingal, whose stone we saw in Killin. Near the head of the glen, at Cashley, literally translated as castles, there stood no less than 5. At a still later period, the glen was called Glen Duv, the Glen of the Black Water. Its history is extensively described in Alexander Stewart's A Highland Parish, published in 1928, and Duncan Campbell's 1886 work, The Lairds of Glen Lyon, 2 volumes to which this episode owes a great deal of its research. Well, this is more like summertime. We are just retracing our steps. Well, here we are at Invervar. Continuing the theme here, as you can see, of very modest dwellings. So instead of taking this track, we're going to keep on heading down the road into Invervar itself.
Behind me here you can see the north side of Miaule-Purley, Miaule-Codnic. Well, here we're getting a fantastic view, in fact one of the best views I've seen of Ben Lawers, showing just how gargantuan it actually is. Towering up there.
St Adavnan, or more commonly referred to locally as St Onan, is associated with an upright stone near Slattic that's remarkable only in its distinctly uncross-like nature, as well as a large bell at the parish church in Innerwick, which must have been a bugger to carry about. We don't know which name he preferred, but for brevity we'll refer to him as Onan henceforth. St Onan, as tradition says, was an alumnus of the monastery of Iona, founded by St Columba about 565. St Onan set out in company with St Fillan to instruct the rude inhabitants of the Grampians in the doctrines of Christianity. Casting lots, Strathfillan, Balquhidder and the lands between fell to St Fillan, Glenlyon and its neighbourhood to Onan. Both saints, in their differing abodes, recommended their spiritual doctrines to the people by showing them that they could better their temporal state. St Fillan erected the mill at Killin, Onan that of Milton Onan in Glenlyon. During Onan's pilgrimage to Glenlyon, one of the dreadful plagues that then so often depopulated Europe broke out over Scotland. At Fortingall, as we found out in last month's show, it made such ravage that only one survived, the old woman who carried the dead to Carn Marav. As the plague extended up the glen, St Onan's people, despairing of all human rescue, sought the spiritual aid of their pastor, whose good help they importuned in the following lines. Onan of the ruddy cheeks, rise and check the plague of thy people. Save us from the death, and let it not come upon us east or west. Just to be sure, they should probably have added north and south to that epithet, but hey, that's just nitpicking. However unreasonable the request, the prudent missionary acquiesced and assembled the people. A meeting held in the open air, within 40 yards of a house in which a young child was dying of the plague, he preached, with some success, the gospel of peace to the excited and horrified multitude. He took, at the same time, all precautions within his reach, separating the sound from the unsound, and did not hesitate himself to discharge the duties of attendance on the dying, while he sent their relations away to the mountain Sheelings, which for the time is a pretty sensible quarantine procedure. Accordingly, the plague soon stopped, and the people, of course, ascribed their safety to the miraculous power of the saint, rather than the simple practical steps that he had taken of isolating the sick. The rock on which he prayed and preached in that dreadful crisis is called Craig Dyna, i.e. Rock of Safety. A crude cross set by the road was probably erected at a later period to excite the devotions of the faithful.
Well, here we are at Camasvraken, one of the few bridges across the River Lion at this end of the glen. We'll head up here to the Praying Hands of Mary. The what, I hear you say? Trust me, if you've ever looked at a guidebook to Scotland, it's very likely that you'll have seen a picture of these. Well, we've come to a very well-maintained track here that I must admit I was a little sceptical about when I saw it signposted at Invervar back there. Kind of ummed and ahed about it and decided it wasn't worth risk of it taking me a million miles off my route. But yeah, look at this. Beautiful. Plus we'll get a nice change swapping over to the other side of the river. And here they are. No, I'm only joking, don't worry. They're further up this hillock here. Well, if like me you reach this point, which is about 350 metres, and feel like, hang on, I'm kind of half the way to Killin here, and ain't no sign of these damn hands. You'll be glad to know that once you've turned the corner after a particularly annoying upward slog, aha! They show themselves over the brow of this little hill here. So without further ado, let's get up there And let's see them hands. So imagine if you're just ambling along here, minding your own business, before guidebooks, before Monroeists, before earnest vloggers like me, and you came across this. Whoa! The hell is that? Magnificent.
It's often assumed, and with good reason, that the praying hands are a megalithic or man-made structure. In fact, they're a completely natural, if admittedly highly improbable, rock formation known as a glacial erratic. Its Gaelic name is Clachascolde, or Stone of Cleaving. It's composed entirely of granite, which splits naturally into straight lines like this, when under pressure from, for example, thousands of tons of moving ice. Essentially, a glacial deposit like the Kettles and Kames in episode 3, the hands have been enchanting visitors to Glen Lyon since at least the last ice age, 11,000 years ago. Well, if there's such a thing as the 7 wonders of the Scottish Highlands, this has to be high on the list. One of the most striking natural formations I think I've ever seen. Unfathomable how this might have formed. It looks like an alien artifact left eons in the past.
So if you're ever in Glen Lyon, wondering whether it's worth that slog up the hill there, just have a look at that. Are you serious? Just there peering through the glen, you can see the remainder of our route. The flanks of Stukenloch in there. It would seem the further you go into Glen Lyon, the more idyllic it gets. Unbelievably, that's still Cairngorm you can see up there. Niall na Aiken is suitably further away. But yeah, it took quite a while to actually traverse underneath Cairngorm there, because it is quite a heck of a big sprawling mountain there. But yeah, onward towards Bridge of Bolgie. Well, as you can see, about 2.5 miles from the bridge at Camarsvraken, we have come to this welcome signpost that tells us there's only half a mile to Bridge of Bolgie. Magnificent upper glen there. And behind me over here you can see the eponymous bridge. So let's get over there.
Don't expect a town, or even a village. Bridge of Bolgie is a name to be taken wholly literally. There is, however, a tea room and the Glen's sole shop, which again rewards those visiting it with appropriate expectations. They do, however, sell tobacco, but you'll need to ask nicely, as it's mainly for the locals. About a mile to the east, Innerwick is host to the only public facilities in the Glen, as well as a small gallery, and the road north to Loch Rannoch. Its historical features include the picturesque parish church, visible from way back in the Glen, the First World War memorial, and some faint traces of one of the 12 aforementioned Fingalian round towers. Opposite, on the south side of the river, stand the farm buildings of Kerrymore, and behind them the neglected graveyard of Brennu, where once there also stood a church, but this fell into decay about 1780.
Well, here we are at the bridge, and it certainly is quite a feat of engineering. Rising high above the River Lion here. Absolutely idyllic surroundings, isn't it? Well, welcome to this delightful little tea room, which I would thoroughly recommend if you're here before 5. You can see they've got some water there and even an ashtray here, goodness me. Of course, what you'll have really come for is this beautiful view. Leave the hype. Glen Lyon is something else. Well, already we're beginning to get a feeling a little more solitude and a bit more wilderness out here. Hopefully this is a bit too distant for most tourists. What the hell is that? Well, there's something out the Cuillin. But no, it's Meilnan Ptarmigan and the Ptarmigan Ridge. Well, this may be the longest walk in the Southern Highlands and certainly in the series so far, but to be honest, it's really flown by. As you can see, Glen Lyon just goes on and on. Megerney Castle down there on the floodplain. And just round that corner, you'll find Loch Lyon, which is where the road terminates. However, we're going to take a trip up here into the sunset to find Loch-an-Daff. What the hell are those rocky buttresses? That, unbelievably, is Meow Kirdy. You can see its summit peeking out there behind the hills. Well, the glen has opened out here, as you can see. Give us a lovely evening walk, a wonderful sense of space out here. Well, this is where we finally leave Glen Lyon for now and head up towards Loch-an-Daff up here. Looking back along there, absolutely gorgeous, isn't it? Okay, well, just behind me there you can see our first sight of Loch-an-Daff, and looking back there past the solitary tree to Glen Lyon the way we've come. Over there, Meow Kirdy, which is certainly a very different face of it than we were used to. Well, here we are at about 400 metres now, and beautiful Caledonian pinewood behind me, as you can see. Yeah, I'm about ready to grab some food and hit the hay, so hopefully it's not too far to Loch-an-Daff. Well, this little cairn here marks the start of the walk, which, yes, we're going to tackle tomorrow. I'm going to camp here, nice little flat bit of ground, and yeah, wow, what a view there. Absolutely fantastic. Now, the western end of Loch-an-Daff here is also one of the most unspoilt and remote areas in the Southern Highlands today. Just to give you an idea, standing here, I'm fairly sure that for about 20 miles in that direction, there are no people. Not a house, no one. There's no road up here, which kind of helps. But yeah, if you're on the lookout for truly wild places, the far end of the loch here is definitely a place to put on your list. For now, good night, and tomorrow I'll see you up there. Good morning, good morning. Off we go for our first one of the day, Mealbooya.
The Lochs Glen, as the hanging valley around Loch and Daff is traditionally known, was a shealing ground used by the tenants of the Roro lands, the area on the south side of the river beneath the Praying Hands, to which in the summer months the families would migrate along with the cattle. The menfolk would busy themselves hunting and fishing, while the women worked the dairy, making cheese and butter for the winter months when the cows were leaner and milk scarce. This 4-month sojourn was basically a summer holiday for the whole families, with the children in particular greatly anticipating the exciting yearly removal to the boundless hills after often brutal and hungry winters. Sadly, Lochs was converted into a sheep farm early in the 19th century. With the more distant shealings lost to them, the tenants of different parts of Glenlyon began to repair to the nearer glens and corries, a pattern common across the Highlands as the clearances began to bite. Thus the Roro tenants betook themselves to the grazings behind Glenlors for their shealings, while the Chest Hill tenants went to those of the pass that leads from Invervar to Rannoch. By this time, the heyday of the shealing system in the Perthshire Highlands had passed, an era that, despite its hardships, was remembered fondly by those displaced from their lands, more often than not at the blade of a pathetic, despicable aristocracy that depressingly still owns much of the Highlands today. From the lone shealing, mountains divide us and a waste of seas, but still our blood is true, our hearts are Highland, as we in dreams behold the Hebrides. Today the land is a deer forest, a misleading name given that deer forests have no trees, and is known as the Lochs Estate. Now the Lochs Estate are kind of recalcitrant again regarding the right to roam laws, and they are very specific over where they would like you to walk. Now, it's important to point out that this isn't obligatory. You've no legal obligation to comply with their wishes. However, especially during stalking season, it is courteous to at least take a note of where they're asking you to go. Generally, the idea is to keep on the ridges. Well, we're beginning to hit some bog now, just from the slightly levelling out here as we hit the ridge. But hopefully it won't last too long. Well, as you can see, the path has got a little more stony now, I'm very glad to report, and views are beginning to open out here. We're getting our first look at Stukenlocken over there. Now, Mealbooya may be one of the easiest Munros, but the mind-blowing views awaiting us at the top are out of all proportion to the amount of effort spent on the ascent. Okay, here we are. Up there you can see the summit ridge, Mealbooya. Views behind me aren't to be sniffed at, I have to say. Stukenlocken looking resplendent there. Mealgurdy. Back to the peaks of the Loris range. Amusingly, this lesser top here is called Hill of Mud, and I've absolutely no idea why it would have that name. Well, I'm afraid the bogs are back. Beautiful view that we've got, but yeah, over the peat hags. However, our path is clear. And just up there on the lip of the corrie there is when the magnifical views begin to open up. Well, now we've finally reached the Montaigne section. Mealbooya. Path has returned. Got more of a standard Munro path, as you can see here. Views out west, looking lovely. Ben Doran there. Unfamiliar angle of it. Making our way up here to the south summit. And holy shit! Beginning to see what they mean about the panoramas here. Great place. Coming as we are to the end of the Southern Highlands, take a retrospective look. Because from here you can see pretty much the majority of said Munros.
You know, there's many moments on the Munros that transcend description. This is one of them, so I'm going to shut up and let these views do the talking. Finally make it. Number 47, Male Booyah. Booyakasha! Ah, another understated little pad here.
From the gatehouse near Bridge of Bolgie, the road to the castle takes you through a splendid avenue of lime, beech, elm and spruce trees, the interlacing branches of which form a vernal arch of foliage beside the River Lion. This avenue, nearly 2 miles in length, was planted by a Mr. Menzies in the 18th century, and as seen, thrives to this day. The Tower House of Megerney was built around 1585 by Mad Colin Campbell, more on him later, and has since been enlarged into a sizable mansion. Around the 14th century, the land on both sides of Glenlyon belonged to the MacGregor clan, and it's likely that they had a keep of some kind at the commanding site of Megerney Castle. By the end of Robert II's reign in 1390, the MacGregors were dispossessed and the lands were split between the Campbells and the Stuarts, with Mad Colin building the Tower House that would become the ancestral home of the Campbells on the north side of the glen. It was here that in 1689 Captain Robert Campbell conceived and planned the despicable Glencoe massacre, later selling the property to the Murrays of Athol. The castle later passed to the aforementioned Menzies of Kildare, who were Jacobites during the Rising of 1715, and hid Jacobite soldiers here during the 45. They also planted the trees lining the Riverside Avenue. The castle is reputedly haunted by the top and lower halves of a woman, which has apparently been seen many times, both in the castle and in the grounds, and is said to have kissed male visitors to Megarney, waking them from sleep. Well, that's me convinced. This is supposedly the ghost of the beautiful wife of one of the Menzies lairds. In a fit of rage, he murdered her and cut her in half, hoping to dispose of the body later, as you do. Her husband excused his wife's disappearance by saying that she had drowned on holiday, which, as excuses go, isn't great. He managed to dispose of her lower half, but was then apparently murdered himself. Isn't that always the way? An apparition of her top half is said to haunt the upper floors, where this part of her body was hidden, while the lower half is reputedly seen on the ground floor and near the family burial ground, where, yep, you guessed it, this part of her was buried. Make of this what you will. Here we are at the Gjorra Dam. Just about to make our way up to Stukenlocken. The first stop on the way is a rather short, sharp shock of a climb up here to the enigmatically named Point 887. Lovely Lochen Daft here. And up there you can see the path I was referring to. Looks fun, doesn't it? Especially in this baking heat, but hey, that's the name of the game. Onward. Well, here we are in the little cairn. This is where the path starts. Well, so begins the crux section. Wouldn't mind a teleporter right now to take me up to the point 887, but hey, that's not how the Munros work. Back down the way we've come from Glenlyon. Back over here to Mielbuia. There's only one way up there. Well, stuff at the top of this crux section here, and the angle is beginning to ease off, thankfully. It is very hot. We've got a nice bit of a cloud break here, and yeah, I'm glad of the multitude of streams that this path crosses. Behind me there you can see way up to point 887. Down there, lush Glenlyon. So onward. Whew! Well, this is us just finally reaching the ridge. And we're beginning to be rewarded with some lovely views. Again, looking over to our cloudless Ben Nevis there, which apparently only happens 12 days of the year, so wow. Just as well I've got a camera. Looking up towards point 887, which is tantalisingly close now. Again, who could tire of this view? Well, it's certainly keeping us waiting for the views of the main summit here, but I can assure you it'll be worth it. Finally, make it to point 887. Our summit over there, Stukenlocken. Over here, Sron Akurakuren, which means nose of the meeting of the Corries.
Not a bad panorama out there, really, is it? Well, down here you can see the aforementioned head of Loch and Da, and very wild indeed down there. Down the bottom of the corrie here, the eponymous Lochan, from which the mountain takes its name. A very deep corrie down here, that if you're doing this hill in winter time, would give you pause on the steeper slopes there up to the summit. A little bit of descent here, then back up to Srona Kurakuren, and then along Green Bay's topped ridge, and the last bit of the climb to the summit. Here we are in Srona Kurakuren, and looking back there to point 887, which reveals itself to be a rather annoying but necessary hump. It's basically up and down on the way here. So for those of you who found Maelbui over there somewhat pedestrian for Munro, this one more than makes up for it, as you can see. A multitude of pleasing mountain features that many will jest have perhaps been sighted in Glen Lyon by mistake. Towering corrie here. Adrenaline-inducing North Ridge down here. But unless you're a fan of false summits, I would advise you keep for a descent. It's looking fairly dramatic. So let's head over there to the second and highest of these twin peaks. Well, here we are, just at the last section.
Since we are in Glen Lyon, probably about time for a Campbell story, right? Now, Stucken Lochan up here has the unlikely title of being the first Munro ever to be summited. This was by Mad Colin Campbell. It's believed the nickname refers to the fact that Colin suffered a serious blow to the head sometime in the early 1580s, following which his behaviour became increasingly, let's say, erratic. We do know that in August of 1583, apparently still sane, he made a legitimate complaint to the authorities about a 60-strong group of cattle thieves who had pinched a lot of heifers, horses and mares from Glen Lyon, and no, for once it wasn't the MacGregors. The court didn't seem to care, however, doing nothing more than ruling them as denounced rebels, which, it's fair to say, left Colin less than impressed. The perpetrators carried on raiding his lands, on one occasion murdering 2 of his tenants, so Colin and his son Duncan, Black Duncan's father, organised a reaver hunt, aiming to lie in wait for them on their next raid. It was a good plan. With a strong force, they managed to catch the dastardly Dougal of Muirdart and 35 of his followers. They were locked in the dungeons of Megarney Castle until Colin could ascertain that they would be adequately punished by the authorities, which is pretty restrained behaviour for a Campbell. However, when Duncan returned from Edinburgh with the news that they had been pardoned, Colin was apoplectic and the red mist fully descended. He hung the men from trees in the grounds of the castle and shot Dougal of Muirdart. Colin and his son were outlawed for this, and not long after, Colin's first wife died. Not one to hang about, Colin took a fancy to the Countess of Errol, and decided the best way to impress a lady was to abduct her and keep her prisoner in his castle, which coincidentally is the plot of a popular children's film. A tale as old as time. Inexplicably, the Countess declined his proposal, and after her many letters of complaint to the authorities, Duncan turfed his father out of the castle in exchange for legal immunity for the killings, and took over the position of laird rather than have the authorities seize the estate and throw them both in jail. Campbell became a madman at large, accompanied by his long-suffering gillie, Findlay, that is, at least until the ascent of Stucken Lochan. In 1590, while hunting on the mountain, they spied a herd of wild goats on the summit, and rather than try to catch one, Campbell decided to chase them all over the crags to their doom in the corrie. He then tried to send Finlay after them. Indeed, by some reports, he actually tried to push him over the edge. But by now the gillie had had just about enough of Colin's antics and threatened to chuck the laird over himself if he didn't stop being such a dick. Happily, Finlay lived to report the tale and seek new, surely less stressful employment elsewhere, while Colin died in 1597.
So here we are, almost at the top now. You can see there, corrie is looking quite impressive from here. Well, a couple of dozen metres to go at the most, hopefully. Is that a false summit? Is it a real summit? Tell me it's the real one. I'm just about jiggered. Not far now, and we'll have all the Glenlyon Munros in the bag. The answer is, you're goddamn right, it's the summit. Here. Wow. Okay. These views rival Mealbury over there for sure. Exceptional. Number 48. Stuck that locking. Well, as you can see, the summit cairn is pretty close to the edge of this unfathomable drop down there to Cordnan-Cat. So, yeah, if this was high winds, I wouldn't be sitting here quite so casually. Thirsty for more, are you? Well, in case you're wondering how I got down from Stuckenlocken and indeed how I'm planning to get back to quote, civilization, unquote, I've headed southwest from the summit, down here to Pubo. Basically another collection of houses. There's some very nice landscape gardening there. However, I wouldn't advise you to dip your feet in the ornamental pond as I did, because you might get a telling off from an irate lady coming to remind you that this is private property, even though when you come down the hydro track and through the gate, there is no signage to tell you this. As I explained to her, she was actually fairly okay, just a bit concerned about people, quote, picking her irises, unquote, which, of course, I wouldn't dream of doing. Up here you can see another dam. This one's at the head of Loch Lyon. You can see it's a remarkably similar design to Loch Daff over there. This one has got 2 control towers on it for you dam fans out there. Looking back down here, absolutely gorgeous, isn't it? You can see Niel Gurdy's twin buttresses facing north. And this is the way that I'm going to get back to civilization. Up over this fairly low, about 500 metre pass, over into Glenlockie. From there, we're walking along a familiar road back to Culin. Well, here we find ourselves in fair Glenlockie once more. Then Callum up there, Mel Glass, Scarehool, and across Melden and Tarmacan Ridge. This is number 48 for me, which means there's only 5 Munros left for us to visit in the Southern Highlands.
Thanks again for watching. Do like, share or comment if you've enjoyed this video. I'll catch you next time, when we'll complete the Wall of Rannoch. Till then, enjoy your adventures.